Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. We're bringing back the return of In Depth, and this time up, we've got Justin Cobb. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
You're more than welcome. So a lot of people would have heard about Carbon6. You've been very visible across all the events. I think, if I'm right, last March really is when you come out of stealth mode was the Prosper Show, March of last year. And so obviously there's been a huge amount of visibility around the business. Do you want to, for those that don't know, and I'm sure most will, but those who don't know, tell us a little bit about Carbon6, and then what we'll do, we'll get into your entrepreneurial story.
Yeah, of course. Our aim, Danny, is really to simplify success for marketplace entrepreneurs, people that are selling on Amazon. We just recently expanded to Walmart with a software that we acquired there, Wally Smarter. The way we view the market is there's few markets that have such a large TAM that are so fragmented. You have thousands and thousands of software apps. Some of those were amazing and just didn't have the reach. And so we set out to start. We acquired many businesses, for example, SoStocked, which we view as the leading FBA inventory management solution. And we provide a platform that gives them scale and allows them a force multiplier through cross-sell, through us being involved in many communities, with the goal of really becoming the ecosystem that serves what we call the professional seller. So if you look at early software companies in this space, they largely had success going after new sellers, right? Helping new sellers in product discovery. What we aim to do is there's 177,000 sellers that make up about 75% of all the sales on Amazon, 3P. We aim to be the company that best serves those professional sellers.
And is that part of the statistics? Because I think it's 60,000 sellers doing 1 million plus, right? That was 2 years ago data. I don't know the fresh.
Yeah, so, it's a little higher. It's like just over 100,000 now.
Oh, is it? That's great. That's good news. That's good that we're expanding that to see that reach. And then the 177,000, what does that profile break down to? Is that like mid six-figure sellers, or like really keyed in?
What the starting point is? Yeah, I think it starts at somewhere in the 400s or the 500s, depending on the data source. We're triangulating from a bunch of different places, but that's about where we get to.
No, it's good. I mean, as we go back from 2 years ago, because we know that, we're in a time at the moment, people got margin suppression. There's less people coming in as the barriers of entry get higher for Amazon. But 100%. I'm really pleased that we've gone from 60,000 data, 1 million plus sellers to around 100,000. That's fantastic. It's almost doubled in a couple of years, considering we've got margin suppression.
Yeah, 100%. And I think our view is that, it'll take a more sophisticated person to enter than it used to. It's not as if the sales in the marketplace are going down, because they're not. They're
not at all.
Albeit going up. So I think you're gonna see larger and larger and larger and larger exits. But you're also gonna see higher and higher failure rates, which you're already seeing now.
Yeah, the way I see it is, if we look back to as far as 2015 when I came in to now, there's a lot more sophistication in place. All it means is it's more like a grown-ups business versus back then it could be a side gig to a certain level. You could start with lower money, but you need to be a real player now to make it work and be super sharp with it. Cool. Let's take it back. What made you as an entrepreneur? So let's take it back to your childhood. A little bit on how you grew up. Who do your mum and dad, you look up to them? Was one of them more entrepreneurial than the other? What was the characteristics, what you took from your parents?
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm adopted. My biological parents were, I think it was like a kind of a college fling, and they weren't gonna stay together forever. And my mother, my biological mother, chose to give me up for adoption. Lucky for me. Obviously a big sacrifice on her part, and a difficult thing to do. And I grew up. My parents, who are the parents who raised me, are incredible. I mean, they're just incredible people. I grew up in a really nice little kind of beach town in Connecticut. Both my parents were self-made. Had nothing when they met and built anything that they had through their work ethic. My father was worked for the telephone company. It was a different time back then, right? It was the safe route now, I believe, is entrepreneurship. The safe route then was go to school, get a degree, get a good job, and you'll have a pension. And so he worked at a telephone company that ended up getting acquired by a company that got acquired by a company that got acquired by AT&T. And that was the safest route. So he wasn't entrepreneurial. Neither was my mother. My mother spent, most of my childhood raising my older brother, and I was also adopted from a different family. Yeah. And we were just really different, right? So my son is 10 and he's a really hyper kid, and I was an unbelievably hyper youngster. And my parents were not stoic, but just very, calm people. My father was an engineer. They were just very, I need to go outside and play with my friends. Why don't you go and read a book? You can read a book and educate yourself. And I'm like, I fucking need to go do something, And it's interesting because my son, who since he was 2 years old, has been told, maybe you should, maybe you should have him tested for this. And he's energetic. And I'm 43 years old, right? I have a lot of energy. I don't know a whole lot of 43-year-olds that have my energy. And it's been like that my whole life. And the thing that they're saying is not, the thing that was a problem for me growing up is now, I think, one of my greatest assets. And it's fascinating because, I think I was at times hard on my parents for not understanding how to handle me or how to deal with me. Now raising 3 children of my own, and again, seeing my son that has the same gifts, affliction, whatever you want to call it, similar personality to me in certain ways, having the knowledge that this comes from me, and then it comes from, my wife, Randa, and understanding why my kids are the way they are. I see what an advantage it gives me as a parent, and how difficult that must have been for my parents raising me, not coming, not being able to see themselves in me in the same way. But yeah, I grew up well. I played a lot of sports. I was a really competitive, fiery kid. My parents have been married for over 50 years. I've never even seen them argue, raise their voice and argue. They still hold hands walking down the street. I mean, they're incredible. They're in their 80s. They are super happy. They sit around and drink wine and talk and eat cheese and hold hands on the beach. I mean, it's really nice. And in the town I grew up in, I think it was very sheltered, Danny. So, everybody was an upper middle class, Roman Catholic, white person, pretty much. There was one that, I think 99.4% Caucasian or something, the town I grew up in. We grew up, while the average income in my town was pretty high and the average home price, was in the millions, we lived away from the beach about 5 miles north in North Madison, Connecticut. So we would have been humble for that town. And so I grew up around a lot of money and a lot of flash that we didn't have, or we didn't flash. My father was very frugal, never spent a penny that he didn't need to spend, really appreciated every dollar. There were kids in my school at 16 getting, Porsches and BMWs, and that was so far away from my life. And there was parties on the beach in these, gigantic beach mansions. I think my parents did a really good job of not giving me things and really making me, have to earn them. So I grew up there was this tension between what I saw around me and what I had. And I think over time, work ethic as I got older, and really attacking, business like a sport filled that void, filled that tension.
Yeah, I was going to say earlier, going back to what you're saying earlier on, is that it's crazy. We live in a world now with kids, is that when they're energetic, we take them to the doctors. We don't say, let's take them to the gym. Let's go and do some sports. Do you know what I mean? They say, what's wrong with him? He won't sit in front of his iPad. He won't sit still. Well, get him outside, because cultures have changed. We used to go out on that. Kids go out on their bikes and stuff, but kids tend to stay indoors nowadays. And then we ask, what is wrong with them? And it's like, no, boys need to run their energy off.
Totally agree.
Burn that energy off. Get them tired.
It caused me a lot of problems, Danny. So in high school, so I played sports growing up, and that helped burn off the energy. And I love sports. I mean, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. It was my passion. And I developed, like, I went through puberty super late. I just like grew up, I developed slowly. So the field, when you play American baseball, when you turn 13, theoretically you would be getting bigger. So now you go from the smaller field, 60 feet bases, to 90 feet bases. So I went from being like one of the better kids in my town, for whatever that's worth, to being pretty average because the field got bigger and everyone else got bigger and I didn't get any bigger. And which again created a lot more tension, which I think, just a lot of like, I want to be better than I am at something. So my freshman year of high school, I go out for the wrestling team, and I'll tie back into the desire to medicate children that have energy thing in a second. So the rest, this guy Nick Ricano, who's like the best wrestler in our town, said, "Hey, we don't have a 103 pounder. Why don't you?" It's like 6 kilos, 47 kilos. Why don't you come out for the team? You can be varsity as a freshman. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I can be varsity as a freshman. I was a small kid. I was the smallest, the shortest, probably the weakest. I mean, just the lightest. I weighed 86 pounds my first day of wrestling practice my freshman year. I won one match my freshman year, and then I lost 19, and I got pinned 18 times in the first period. But I felt like this sport is fair because it's based on weight classes. So I stopped baseball, I stopped soccer, and I went all in on wrestling. By my junior year, I ended up winning a state championship. All I did all year long was wrestle all off season, went from 1-19 to like 19-18, like 52-2 or whatever it was in one state. About a month before the states, they were trying to kick me out of the school because I was hyper and I was talking in class, like nothing crazy. I wasn't like getting in fights. I wasn't like a big troublemaker. I was just talking. I found school to be boring. It was kind of easy. I was distracted. And they decided, this is like when whatever the pharmaceutical company that owned Ritalin was like going and doing this tour of all the schools in America and saying like, if you have a kid that sometimes doesn't listen, he needs Ritalin. If you have a kid that like is a kid or whatever. And so my parents go to one of these conferences and the teachers are getting indoctrinated into this, fucking nonsense. And so they sent me for a 2-day test. It was like 12 hours or something between 2 days. And I came back like off the charts in 4 out of 5 metrics, like you have ADHD. And so the school said, if you don't treat this with medicine, then you're going to have to leave. And my wrestling coach stuck up for me and kept me in that school. And so since my son at age 2, we're in New York and they're saying, oh, your son has a lot of energy. I'm like, thank God he does. Right. Like, thank God. Like, and thank God he does. But it's like, if I had different parents, different circumstances, if my coach hadn't looked out for me, like how would that have altered my life? Something that would have muted, and I'm sure that medicine has I'm not casting judgment on people taking medicine. I think medicine is overall a pretty good thing, but
as a go-to, that person's got energy, let's medicate them. It's like, well, why don't you find a way to help them burn up their energy through sports or outdoor activities?
Maybe sitting in a classroom for 7 hours where they teach the lowest common denominator, where Johnny still can't do 8 + 7 and we're in 8th grade and you're still teaching that person. Like maybe not everyone's just going to sit there quietly and wait for the teacher to move on to something more interesting. Maybe they should, there's maybe the problem's in the education system. Maybe the problem is in the way classrooms are set up. Maybe the problem is, maybe the problem is, but the quick solve is here, take this, it'll calm you down.
Yeah, that's the problem. If you look, I think I see a meme was a couple of weeks ago now. They took a picture of school 100 years ago, the school today. It looks exactly the same.
I've seen it. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. It's like nothing else is the same.
So what's you leave school, university, where did we go from here?
Went to a few different schools. So I wrestled at a small Division III school. I didn't do a whole lot of schoolwork in high school. I had really good SAT scores. Like I scored well, but my grade point average was pretty bad. So I went into the only school that would take me for wrestling and kind of worked my way and ended up graduating from a pretty good school, Loyola in New Orleans. And then I got into some good law schools. And my plan was to go to law school. I was taking a year off playing in a band. That was like my deal, and traveling around. And I was going to then go to law school. During that time, the engine on the car we were driving around the country broke. So I needed to get a job. I was in New Hampshire at the time. I got a job in Boston. I answered an ad in the newspaper. That was how we used to get jobs back in the day, right? So I answered an ad in the newspaper in the Boston Globe that said like entry level, sports minded. We will train cash daily, $500 to $700 a week. I needed, I think, $531 or something. So I was like, that's perfect. So I went down and interviewed at this company, and it was doing door-to-door sales, selling coupons. So they had some big contracts like Subway and Blockbuster. Remember Blockbuster? And they had some local restaurants and local golf courses. And it was kind of like these entertainment type books where you'd sell $30 and you get, you know, a bunch of 2-for-1 dinners, or $20 and you get 5 free sandwiches from Subway. So I took that job originally just to make the money to pay off the engine. And, you know, I ended up sticking with that company, and the competitiveness inside me, it sparked something. And the fact that it was day-to-day results, and even it was in this, you know, this medium, you'd meet such interesting people. And I grew up in a fairly sheltered place, like I mentioned earlier. So just going to different neighborhoods and dealing with different people. And I can remember like going to Worcester, Massachusetts, and having to learn the subway pitch in Spanish. And I didn't, when people answered the door, I didn't even know what they were speaking. I had to ask the third person, what language are you speaking? And she's like, Spanish, like you're in America. I'm like, I know, but I've been growing up, you know, I haven't been around a whole lot. And so it was fascinating and competitive and fun. And the company, you know, told me, if you do really well and you can build a team, you know, we'll put you into business for yourself. And then I proceeded to kind of make that business, you know, my own. And I built a large face-to-face direct sales team, spent 18 years doing it, moved to the UK, spent time in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Poland, before coming back to the States. Today, we have thousands and thousands of people in that business and have put well over 500 people into business for themselves. I'm servicing some of the largest companies in the world.
What? And to this day, do you still own that company as well, to the side?
So it's totally decentralized. The corporate structure is probably like a longer conversation for another day. So the individuals that we've trained all run those companies, but yeah, they're some of my best friends in the world. We have multiple offices in London. We're all over. I mean, they're some of my best friends in the world. I am still involved, you know, in coaching them. I've replaced myself with enough, you know, high level people that can run the business. And that really created the vacuum that started Carbon6. Which was,
that's your jump. So basically, it wasn't that you went from one job to you'd done 18 years and then Carbon6, or has there been gaps in between?
I never had a job for longer than 3 weeks in my life before I started in that direct sales business. And I finally found something that was like, that touched all the things I wanted. I wanted to travel the world. The business was able to be done anywhere. I wanted to compete every day. I wanted it to be based on performance. I wanted to own my own business. And I think I had thought that I was starting to doubt my own ambition, because I was a pretty bad employee. And I found that when I was, as an entrepreneur, I was really motivated, and that helping other entrepreneurs, as I started training people and teaching them how to run their, you know, own companies, that there was nothing on earth that unlocked me and my best the way that did. And then I just kept going with it. Like I opened my first business in Charlotte, North Carolina. I taught someone to run that office. I moved to Atlanta. Got the opportunity to move to London. I'd never even had a passport. I got a passport, I think, at 5 o'clock for a flight that was at 8. And I woke up and I lived in England. I'd never been out of the country. It was confusing to me why we were driving on the, you know, the left side of the road. I mean, it was all super, totally. Yeah. Went out. We were doing a first day. We were doing sales for an Indian restaurant in Pimlico.
Yeah, I know Pim.
And like the third door I knocked on was Eric Clapton's door in Chelsea, which was like super cool. And his like his cleaner answered. He wasn't there. And we opened, you know, we worked with companies like TalkTalk and Sky TV and did charity fundraising, and worked with like Anglian Home Improvement, a bunch of other companies. And we started, growing. And from that, I mean, we in the States, you know, we work with the largest telecommunications companies, largest energy companies. We've raised over $5 billion for charities. Just my face-to-face sales reps over the last, decade. That's a little bit of an approximated number, but yeah. So it was fun, and then I felt like I'd gotten pretty good at that business in English, and I wanted more challenge, and so I moved to Spain, where I didn't speak the language, and brought 4 people with me, and none of us spoke Spanish. A few of them lied and said they did. And when we got there, I found out they didn't, which is kind of funny. And then we grew. We opened 35 companies in Spain in a year. Then we opened up Portugal and Italy and Poland. It was fun, man. It was like it was a challenge. It was this incredible set of challenges, and just tried to keep stacking more under the bar. Back to the States 2015. Kept growing business in the States, and then it hit and hit and a newborn. And I said, hey, can you stop going in the office for a few months until we see how this thing shakes out? And initially we thought we were going to be in trouble because we're face-to-face sales in COVID. Obviously that's like, not a great comment. It's like oil and water. But we just made a decision to make no one unemployed. We kept everybody with us. A lot of our competitors, made people unemployed. And so we basically doubled in size over 6 months. And I had a bunch of leaders who had ran that business that I worked with and trained and had the pleasure of and honor of coaching and working with and kind of moving all over the Western world with. And they said, hey, we don't need you to be in here every day. Give us some space. Let us run it. So we moved down to Puerto Rico during the lockdowns, shortly after that transition was taking place. And for the first time, I was living in a place where we didn't have a direct sales office. And so I had nowhere to go into. And my plan was I was just going to do a bunch of investing and kind of hang out and, feel like I achieved victory. I'd always said I wanted to retire at 40, and I was 40, and here I was, and I could retire, and, was blessed enough to be able to do that. And I just failed at retirement. And
I think Steve Simonson's on his third retirement as well. He can't let it
alone. I watched that YouTube video like 4 months ago, and every minute of it, like twice, and was like, I totally relate to this guy.
Yeah.
It's super interesting. He's an awesome guy.
He's lovely. I've got a lot of time for Steve. I think, I respect everyone, but like when, if you want to make a phone call and you go, who would you call in certain things? Like Steve's always at the top of the list on certain things. I have a lot of admiration for what he does, how he carries himself, and just who he is as a human being, really, and the way he helps entrepreneurs. Amazon. How did we do the direct sales, doing everything that you did do, and suddenly go, what, I'm going to set up an aggregator with inside Amazon now? What were the steps to get you, 1, to Amazon, 2, to devise the idea, and 3, to execute?
So it was a confluence of a bunch of stuff. So like I said, I was going to invest, and this is like the back end of 2020. So and the start of 2021. So everything is Thrasio, etc. One of my neighbors here started an aggregator called Market Fleet. I didn't even know that he, later until it got acquired by Oslam Group. Like there was just everything around was this Amazon aggregator thing was just everywhere. You couldn't avoid it being a person looking at investments. Everywhere I looked, there was a different aggregator with a different spin. Almost all the people that I met initially that were younger than me that live in my neighborhood here were Amazon sellers.
Right.
And I had no idea. I just had no idea. I remember playing poker with a couple of guys, like, what do you do? Like, we sell on Amazon. And I'm thinking to myself, like, like houses are not cheap here. Like, really? That's what you do? I remember meeting Brendan Morris, and his stories, it's incredible. I was working at a grocery store cutting meat and cheese. 3 years later, I exit for 8 figures. Like who does that, right? The kind of freedom as I'm meeting these people, and I'm meeting sellers, and there's tons of them here in Puerto Rico that I'm lucky enough to spend a bunch of time with now. As I'm meeting people, I'm going, I understand this language. Don't want to do the 9 to 5. Want to work for yourself. Want to be able to travel. Want to be able to have freedom. Like I've learned this language and been teaching this language for the last 2 decades. This is super interesting to me on that level, right? I ran into an investment where there was a guy who was going to start rolling, and like my failed retirement comes from everything I saw. I wasn't thinking of, is this a good investment opportunity? I was thinking I would love to operate a competitor to this business, right? Or like I'm evaluating the team and the operators almost entirely, and the idea is like the idea is everyone has a good idea. Every idea sounds well, sounds well and good. I don't understand enough about finance. I don't understand enough about macroeconomic trends. Like I don't feel like where I can add value on if this is a good investment is anything other than evaluating the operators of that business, because that's what I feel like I know how to do, right? So we see some things that were, had some similarities and some overlap. A guy was going to roll up agencies and software businesses in Amazon. A guy who was going to a team that was rolling up Shopify apps. There was a bunch of those, and really just saw a gap and got interested and said, I really early in my investment retirement journey realized that wasn't going to work, and what was going to work was me finding a business to run, and saw an opportunity. Like it started out, saw a financial opportunity, thought someone's going to create a multi-billion-dollar company doing this. It's too obvious. The TAM is so large, and because Amazon's really only opened up their APIs over the last several years, there's really no one servicing it, in a grown-up way, let's say, or that sounds insulting.
At a scaled level,
yeah. And so someone's going to fill that gap. And I don't know a lot about raising money, but it seems like everyone's throwing money at e-commerce right now. So I reached out to Kazi Ahmed, who's one of my co-founders, and I'd been a lead investor on his last business that he had just exited. It was like a roll-up of mental health clinics that use psychedelics for treatment. Pretty cool business, and I was just really impressed with him when we went through that process of investing in that business. And he was everything I wasn't. He was a Harvard Business School guy that is good at everything. Like when I first met him, what's your specialty? He said, I'm a generalist. And I was like, what I've come to realize is that generalist means he's significantly better than the average person at just about everything. And he was just a lot of things that I wasn't, right? I thought he'd be safe to investor, where I was more, I had a non-traditional path there maybe, which may or may not be true. Different investors are looking for different things. So I called him and said, hey, I think that there's an opportunity here to do a roll up with SaaS companies and Amazon. I think there's a larger opportunity, which is just become a software company that services the market as things move upstream and consolidation happens to the top 1% and top half of 1%. I don't see anyone that's incredibly well positioned. There's some businesses that have gotten a lot of traction, but they're going to have to kind of move the battleship, as you see some of them, starting to do now. I think we should do it. And he said, okay, great. And so that was the birth of Carbon6. And that was 2 years and a week and a half ago.
Yeah, I think so first time I met you, you explained me, I said, how do you explain it, like the benefit to sellers? And you said, imagine in your browser, you have all these tabs. Imagine if all these tabs operated together, but more succinctly, they were closer in terms of relationships. So they're basically integrated with each other. So you haven't got to use all these disparate softwares. Is that still the same play for you?
100%. So we just launched at Prosper this year. We launched a bundle on the back of Sell Investigators. Sell Investigators has kind of become like the tip of the spear for us. Essentially profit recovery. So, Amazon breaks, loses, damages, screws up, makes mistakes in inventory, and we go and do an audit, and then we go and collect the money and take a small success fee for it. So that's kind of become the tip of the spear, where a lot of times it's our first conversation. So we're bundling behind that, and everything that we've put in that bundle, analytics through managed by stats, alert streams, the alerts is all single sign-on. Single sign-on will get expanded to all of our tools. Single authentication. We're finalizing with Amazon right now, where permissions will go all across. We're integrating the data back end, and we have some amazing stuff over the next 6 months, 9 months, without giving away too much. That's ultimately 100% the vision. It starts with single sign-on, single billing, single authentication, and then the data being able to communicate between apps, and just being more intuitive. And I think that the advantage that we have is that we're looking at other things that were built before us and able to build that that layer on top, that cohesive layer from scratch, which I think in many ways is a huge advantage.
Yeah. Cool. And where are you in? We can't talk about certain things, but where are you in the path? Like, so March last year when you come out of stealth, then you've had Prosper this year. You've announced the bundle.
Yeah.
In terms of roadmap, how far down the road of the vision are you? Do you think 50%, 30%?
I would say 30 to 50, somewhere in between 30 to 50%. So if we look at kind of like our core tools, you have Seller Investigators, you have So Stocked, you have Pixel Me, which we've been deep in the lab. That's going to blow some people's minds. In fact, we'll get it to you on a demo, Danny, for seller sessions. PPC Entourage, which is our inventory management solution. We also just acquired a business, ChargeGuard, which does 1P prop recovery. So we're the only company that can do both 3P and 1P as well as hybrid. So we spent a lot of time. We spent more time building within those apps to make them the best. I can confidently say that Seller Investigators is the number one solution for recovering more money faster and with more transparency. I can 100% with confidence say that if you're using anything else on me for external traffic, that you're making a mistake. I can confidently say that anyone using an inventory management software that's not SoStocked would be better served using SoStock. We've focused on those on that, and we're parallel tracking all the unification, and we'll start releasing that at a faster clip over the next quarter.
Yeah, because I was going to say one of the toughest thing as well is bringing all those different back ends together into I'm not a programmer, but someone who runs an agency. We build all our own technology as well. There's that element of different languages that these softwares are being coded in, and it's how do you bring those together? Then you've got all the legacy around it. That's going to be quite a tough challenge to get all of that together, I imagine.
Huge undertaking. Yeah. And our CTO, Brett McLaughlin, great guy, worked for NASA for a bunch of years before. And, what he feels like it's complex, but he feels like it's not complex compared to things he's done in the past. But yeah, I mean, some of it's refactoring, some of it's, rewriting in different language. Some of it is you have APIs between the tools and you have a common data lake, and that kind of forgives a bunch of the warts. And then some of it is full rewriting, using the logic on top. And I think that, we had a choice between making the software we had better on a standalone basis or focusing on the unification. And I think we did it the right way, which is we've focused on building the best mouse traps in our core areas. And now we're focusing on having, smart homing all those mouse traps so they can communicate with each other, for lack of a more eloquent analogy.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that gives us an idea in around what's going on with Carbon6 at the moment. I normally ask, as I come towards the end of the interviews, a couple of questions. Is the first one, in terms of being an entrepreneur, life, etc., in terms of life experiences, what has been your darkest hour just before dawn?
So the way I did college was I would go in for the syllabus. I'd drive around the country, going to see music. I'd come back for midterms. And I thought I had it balanced, and I would study and I'd do all-nighters, but I was just kind of messing around, and I thought I had it all figured out. And then my senior year, like the last semester, something broke. Like I started having, like stress I'd never had before. I started feeling like things that I would call anxiety, like that I'd never felt before. And I think I realized that like I was not on the right, just wasn't on a path to get where I wanted to go. I didn't really know where I wanted to go. I was just kind of like this like hippie kid, just kind of like floating around. And it was, made for a really uncomfortable several months. It was a weird last few months of my senior year of college. Then I traveled all around the country. I don't know what I was looking for, but I definitely didn't find it. And when I start in the field in that direct sales business, I get a single point of focus. And that kind of takes me out of it. And I think that was the most challenging time. If there was another time that was pretty challenging was, that's really it, Danny. Like if I look at it, it was, I'd always meant, like I was always the kid where it was like, you have a lot of potential, but if you'd apply yourself, and I just had never gotten around to really applying myself, except in like, sports a little bit, and, music. I played like saxophone growing up and stuff, was in competitions there, but it was just kind of all catching up with me that this way of kind of blowing things off and just doing what I felt like doing was not going to be sustainable. And somewhere in my subconscious, I think I understood that I had to make some sort of major change. And that was like really scary. And I had really taken a lot of pride and thought I was a very strong-minded person. And when it kind of like broke a little bit, it like what happens to your ego when your ego gets shattered is a really scary place to, it's a really scary place to live.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't like, I've been pretty lucky in my life, and I'm just really fortunate. Like I could have been aborted. I could have been adopted into any other family on earth other than my incredible parents.
I was going to say that, considering your start,
so
look where you are now. Yeah.
So lucky, man. So like all the adversity in my life, I've basically has been me making a mistake and then having to deal with the aftermath of the mistake that I made. And I don't expect anyone to, I could go through other tough. It's just like, I'm so fucking lucky. At times I've not understood it. At times I probably haven't respected it. At times I've blown myself off course. I think for me, it was like, but a lot of childhood as a result was difficult because I was being told that I was bad. I thought I was good, but I was bad. I was in the principal's office all the time. I was getting in trouble. I wasn't like, I was just, it was confusing for me. It was confusing for me, but I think like, it was gut wrenching realizing that I couldn't play professional baseball because I thought no one will work harder than me. No one loves it more than me. But like, that's not real struggle. But I think it created who I was today because I didn't get what I wanted. I wasn't just given things. I had to fight for every fucking inch, and I had to hustle like crazy. And now I don't know any other way to do it. I don't know any other way than to get in the weeds and try to lead from the front and set the pace and just try to set this frenetic pace that gets me out of this lifelong. I wish I was, bigger, stronger, taller, faster, better at this sport, better at this thing.
Yeah, I think as entrepreneurs, we've got something to prove. Some people didn't even know, like on a subconscious level, they don't realize when they may look back later, but I would say nearly every entrepreneur on the planet does it, even if they don't know why at that time. There's always something to prove. It's almost like, fuck you to the teachers that didn't believe in you.
Oh, it's so important.
There's some sort of kick back in your childhood and you go, you'll never become nothing, or there's always something that sits there, tweaks away on people. And it's not until they've hit a certain level and reach a level of maturity, you go, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm here doing what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean?
It's so my wrestling coach, who I mentioned earlier, was the most important, other than my parents, the most important adult to me.
Yeah.
I get in trouble. He'd show up at court. I mean, whatever. He was just always there. He'd defend me to school. He was always there for me. And he passed away right before COVID started. And it was like really tough on me. I've been lucky in my life where I've not experienced a lot of loss. Grandparents, I was younger. I loved them. My grandfather was very tough for me when I was like 6 years old, 8 years old. My grandmother, again, I was like 12, 13 years old. Maybe a bit older than that, but like this was the first real adult loss that I had. And he was he was my hero. And we did a big GoFundMe, and like his family is so important to me. And I went back to Connecticut and spent a bunch of time there. But I gave the eulogy at his one of the eulogies at his funeral. And this is a town where I messed up a lot in. And to go away and then, became a public speaker and was able to go back and I feel like do a pretty good job of doing service to my hero. Right. And there's, I don't know, I think like 20% of the town was there, like maybe 2,000 out of 10,000 or 2,500 out of 12,500 people. And there was some aspect of, there's a lot of emotions that happen there. Like, I hope that I did him proud and whatever. And there's some aspect of going back to my town, which I don't go back too often, and going like, despite aspects of here telling me that I wasn't good enough in different ways, like I am good enough. I also think that chip, I don't know if that itch ever gets fully scratched. I really thought, yeah, I don't know if it ever does. So I think it's both the things that make us great as entrepreneurs, or great's a strong word, but makes us succeed as entrepreneurs. Yeah. It also might be the thing that makes us, die giving a podcast interview with you interviewing, podcast guest on the other side. Like there, I don't think there's a finish line necessarily. I wonder a lot, like, is there a finish line? I don't know that there is.
I think that's when we drop down dead, isn't it? I think with a lot of people, I'm 48 this year and I have no desires of slowing down.
And like, what better way to live than to be more excited today, to crush today, to get more value out of today and provide more value out of today than yesterday. Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, 2 more questions for you. Probably a silly question to ask you because you've got plenty of it, but money or legacy?
A legacy. It's what people say about you when you're not around. I don't. I think it's not even close.
Which leads me lovely into, because of what you just said, because a lot of people have various different permutations on that question because it's quite broad. And the final question is, how would you like to be remembered?
As a person who was able to have success, not just in business, but have a successful family, be a good dad, be a good member of a community, be a good boss, be a good leader. I think that growing up in that small town that was upper middle class, I saw a lot of people that had achieved financial success that were great examples, and I saw some that were not at all what I would want to be, or not at all what I want for my life. And I'm still super close with all my childhood friends, regardless of if in normal life, if we met now, if we'd ever run into each other. And every one of their happiness and success is important to me. And that he cared, that he didn't mail it in, that he went above and beyond, not above and beyond, because you should, just that he maxed out whatever gifts he was given, whatever luckiness he had, whatever
he made the most of it all instead of wasting these opportunity and potential.
And he did it in a way that wasn't just for selfish motives.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, that was your in-depth. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Danny.
You're welcome. If people want to reach out to you, I know you're a busy guy, but is there a way of communicating if other entrepreneurs and stuff want to reach you?
Yeah, you can just, email me at justin@carbon6.io.
Cool.
And, I try to get to every message that I can. I love this industry, Danny, because it's our people. It's the entrepreneurial people. It's all, it's a different industry than I grew up in, so to speak, but everyone's story is so interesting. Everyone's path is it's different, but there's commonality in all of it. We all have that spirit. We all have that chip. We all have that itch we need to scratch, and we're all fucking getting after it. So
exactly.
Come up to me if you see me at an event, send me an email, excited to meet all of you.
Sounds good. Guys, thank you for joining us today. Justin, thank you for joining us. I'm sure we'll get you back on in the future. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Sharon will be up next, and I'll see you again next week. Take care of yourself and your family. Much love.
Thanks for everything you do, Danny.